And we're live. Welcome everybody. What's up? Greetings, blessings, salams. Pierre Etienne here, founder of the Healing Studio Online. Welcome to you. I hope you're doing well. Today I'll be in conversation as always on Tuesdays with Mrs. Amari Dior, who's a chronic pain coach. And we are going to continue our conversation on post-traumatic growth. We're going to continue this conversation on a topic that I feel should be discussed a little bit more because so many of us are very well acquainted with post-traumatic stress and all the different diseases and problems and issues comes in the aftermath of trauma or during trauma. And yet know that that's not the only thing that happens. So yes, today, conversation on post-traumatic growth, part 2. Amari should be joining us soon, and here she is.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to you. How are you?
How are you? I'm good, thank you. Let me put in my earphones.
So as I was saying, welcome to you and welcome to everybody to part 2 of this conversation on post-traumatic growth, right? As always, I'm going to invite us and I'm going to invite everybody, whether you're joining us live or you're watching this recording, to just take a couple of breaths here. Might have been a long day. Maybe you're starting your day regardless of where you are right now. Invitation to just take a couple of breaths here. With your eyes open, your eyes closed, take a moment to check in. And on the third one, if you want, you can even just let it sound out. Just checking it out a little bit. Just checking with yourself, gentle touch. Just do what you need to do, maybe a little stretch if you're starting your day. So, welcome everybody to part 2 of post-traumatic growth. So, shall we take a moment maybe to reflect on what was discussed last week?
Yes, definitely. So I think that we began, from what I remember, is just talking about what post-traumatic growth is. And what I really wanted the audience to take away from just the first part of last week was that post-traumatic trauma can happen in a sense where it's not just something that is a terrible accident or something that's within war, but also to be able to understand that trauma can happen in everyday life, in yearly. It happens very often. It can be a small T or a big T, where in a sense that it can come from loss of a relationship, grief, a family member or a loved one becoming sick, a diagnosis, us living in the pandemic, and all these other things. So just for the audience to recognize that trauma can come from these different things, and to be kind to yourself and to have patience and to provide that support and care that we all need at this time and every day of our lives, just in the sense of recognizing I've gone through something that was stressful and I need to heal from it. It doesn't have to be swept under the rug, and we don't have to live by society standards of just stay positive all the time, because no one lives in a rainbow, right?
And that's because that's thoroughly unhealthy, right? Like pushing it down into our body, into our nervous system, is just basically, preparing for, that thing is going to come back with a vengeance. I speak from personal experience. If when I get some cues that my back have chronic, have back issues due to some like traumatic accidents many years ago. You know, if I don't acknowledge the early signs, it's not going to go away. What it's going to do is at some point, I'm going to find myself paralyzed on the floor. And I want to go back briefly here on big T, small t trauma, because how many people, when you ask them, you know, do you think you've been through trauma? I would say no, you know, and obviously, and even people who've been through, you know, big T trauma. Like I've worked with refugees, I've worked with people, victims of torture and so on and so forth. Even sometimes people acknowledging that feels like a weakness, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's important, I feel, for us as a society, as individuals, to reclaim the courage to say, like what you said earlier, which is, I've been through a lot. I've been through that, right? And so we do have, like you said, these big T traumas, war, health challenges, and so on and so forth. We do have these small T traumas, which can be, I'm late for work, I'm under like a tight deadline, et cetera, et cetera. You mentioned the pandemic. I personally think that, you know, we're sitting on the ticking bomb right now. A lot of clients were having relatively minor issues. These issues have just, you know, blown out of control for many people, unfortunately, because we are living in a constant state of fear. Or let me rephrase that. We're living, for many of us, in countries where the media and the government is promoting a state of fear. And I'm saying that as an invitation also for emotional sovereignty, and to tell people, to remind myself, you and everybody, that fear is an option, and there's ways to deal with that fear. I'm not talking about denial. I'm not talking about, once again, just like positive thinking. I'm saying, how can I engage with that fear, process that fear, release that fear, and identify the moments when it's okay for me to not be in fear, right?
Right.
So small T trauma, big T trauma. Let's remember there's also cumulative trauma, right? This is really historical trauma, cumulative trauma, when depending on, you know, where you're coming from, your ethnicity, your history. Let's remember that, again, you know, carrying loads and loads of trauma from previous generations. We've touched upon that briefly. I think it would be good for us to have a proper conversation on that. All this to say that I'm challenging anybody to tell me I've never been traumatized, because that would just reflect, I think, and I'm saying that with compassion, that would just reflect a lack of self-awareness. Because everybody in 2021, at the recording of this conversation, everybody, regardless of where you live in the world, right, has gone through stuff and has probably felt overwhelmed at some point, right?
Right.
And having said that, what one of my takeaway from last week is that this fear also, I think, is a prompt for action. It's not that I think, it's like there's ways, it's one way to see it, is that fear will promote action. Yeah. I feel. Unless if we don't process it, we don't work on it, and then it gets shut down. Worse and we shut down. Right? Hence the invitation to engage with the fear, right? To learn some skills, to learn some tools, to hold that fear, just like we've had conversation around holding that pain, holding that fear. Exactly. Because once we're in conversation with that, with these fears, these sensations, these emotions, these traumatic, these trauma, then there's an opportunity to process, to heal, to move forward, and to rise to a higher level of functioning. Which again, as a reminder for the viewers, here is what we're talking about. We're not talking about bouncing back. We're not talking about going to the old version of you. There's no such thing. And that's a hard realization. It was a hard realization for me. It's a hard realization for a lot of the people I'm working with. I think this is something that we can apply right now to society as a whole or to globally. Like there's no
Yeah.
going, right? COVID
Right.
has made us go through something that's unique. We've lived things that are unique, and right now the question is really, what's next? What now?
Yeah. And what really there are two things that stuck with me in what you said. I mean, what you said was amazing, but I wanted to touch on two things. Is that yes, oftentimes when even for myself and just talking about my own journey, when I came to the realization or just the fact that I had chronic pain, it was tough for me to say. And in a way, I saw it as a weakness. And in a lot of traumas, death of a family member or a family member becoming sick with Alzheimer's, like these things where it's, I I was often taught to just sweep it under the rug, look at everything that I can be grateful for. This isn't a big deal. I get over it. Everyone goes through it. So it's not a trauma. Um, and what I want to say is it takes a lot of power to say, I am fearful in this moment. I am weak in this moment. I need to change in this moment. And, um, and being able to say that is powerful itself. And going through a chronic stressor or chronic pain, in a sense, with my community and myself, is powerful. And a lot of times when I first talk to my clients, it's I don't want to seem weak in front of my family, or I don't want my job to know that I'm going through this, etc. And I the whole point of coaching with me is the fact that no, we find power in something that we once thought was weakened us, because at the end of the day, um, there are we sh- I will not allow my crisis to be discounted.
Mm.
I will not allow my I will not say that 4 years of chronic pain can be just swept under the rug and it's not a big deal, or a death of a family member is not a big deal, or a loss of a relationship is not a big deal. My crises are what changes me. And when you talk about not bouncing back, we cannot bounce back once we go through a trauma, a chronic stressor, chronic pain, because when we go through these experiences in our lives, what happens is, one, we find out that we're stronger than we ever knew before. So why would we want to go back? We've conquered something, we've dealt with something that has made us stronger, at a point where, for me, if I ever imagined that I would have chronic pain for years and years and years, every day of my life, or have my legs go out and me be paralyzed on the floor for an hour, before 4 years ago, I would have been like, there's no way I could deal with that. There's no way. Just like sign me up and put me in a hospital for the rest of my life. Can't deal with it. And yet I'm here today. And so the bouncing forward is a really big thing, because a lot of times, and I have to catch myself at a certain point in my healing journey. And I also have do many exercises with my clients, is that we are not trying to get your life back. The reason why you have pain, the reason why your body is in such a state where it's ringing alarms and it's not okay and it's shutting you down, is because something is not right. You're not aligned. Like when my pain became chronic pain, I was not aligned with my mind, body, and spirit. I was not aligned with my values. I was ignoring my body. I was not being true to myself. I was trying to be a goodist and a perfectionist and all these things that were unhealthy. So we're not trying to bounce back. Absolutely, we're trying to bounce forward. And that's where post-traumatic growth happens, is when we find strength in our pain. We find unimaginable resiliency in the fact that we can overcome something that seems so large to us at the time, that we don't even like for me, I didn't even want to notice it or even comprehend it or acknowledge that it was happening to me because it seemed so traumatic.
Yeah. I I want to repeat these or when you said around that reclaiming this, the ability to feel, the ability to acknowledge whatever it is that you're holding in your body, fear, pain, and so on and so forth. We talked last week when it comes to post-traumatic growth around the different changes that may occur, the different areas of your life, changes in the sense of self, in your relationships, in your philosophy of life, in your existential views / spiritual, religious views, and so on and so forth. And there's one sentence that often comes back in the groups and in the programs I facilitate on post-traumatic growth, which is more vulnerable yet stronger. Yeah. More vulnerable yet stronger. And you may remember, because I think you were here in one of these sessions. And that's really something that I want to pause here and I want to let it sink in, because when we talk about having the courage, right, to say, this is heavy, I can't swipe it under the rug, nor do I want to do so, and I want to face it. And that takes courage, and my hope is that in that moment I'll have the resources, both inner and outer resources, to deal with it. And that's why I do a lot of group work, because the second thing that came up when you talk about the pain that is transforming us, physical or emotional, you know, the image that came is birth. And I can only speak of it, right, as a man, having witnessed, you know, for 30-something hours, my beautiful wife giving birth to a second child. And in some very odd, weird way, I've seen that scene again in a group of men, as a brother was on the floor, on his floor, just yelling in pain, connecting to his pain. And what he was doing in that moment, I was like, this is what's happening. Like we're dulying this man into his new self. This man is giving birth to his new self by connecting to this pain. And I had this moment where I was like, wow, this is amazing. That pain, right, is the opportunity to be reborn, right? I don't want to say to start over, but pretty much to start anew with a fresh way, with a fresh perspective on things. And I can only speak for myself when, you know, there are things for me that I used to take for granted. The ability to walk, the ability to carry my kids, and so on and so forth, right? And so right now, having the courage to say, this is not a given. This can go away, like in a second. How powerful is that? And there's a sense of vulnerability. And again, I've been talking a lot with clients about grief and death. And yet the conversation with my clients is, well, what's wrong with death? And that's not I don't think that's a controversial statement, because I think we've disconnected ourselves from, and maybe because we've become more and more scientific, secularized, and we've lost, a lot of people, I think some of my friends think, that they're just a pile of meat, and very soon there'll be a pile of ashes. And I'm like, that's okay, that's, knock yourself out. If that works for you, that's great. But for me, there's also a sense of, there's the ability to connect to something greater, to bring back spirituality, right? To bring back humility into my life. I think allows me to have more gratitude, right? Allow me to be able, just like I've mentioned to you before, even we talked about practices, even though my practices are fluctuating, one of my favorite practices is what's called Salat, a prayer of gratitude,
Okay.
which is something if I was diligent, I should be doing every day, and I'm, as to the best of my ability, trying to be there. But oftentimes, just that outlet, and to say, oh, "Wow, I'm up today, and I'm okay," right? And so, being able to have that vulnerability that is actually transformed into greater strength and greater awareness, and more gratitude, which is like this virtuous loop, which is like, oh, that's great, and it's still going on, and I'm still able to walk right now, and so I'm just reminding myself and everybody here that vulnerability is scary, but it's so powerful. It's such a powerful agent of change. And I wouldn't say, to emotionally get naked and to face your fear alone, because you do need resources. You do need, I think, community, spirituality. All of these are resources that I think can allow us, or at least allowed me, and or is allowing me, because that's an ongoing work, to get in touch with my fear, with my pain, and as a result to grow as I want to say, as a more mature, hopefully, as a more mature version of me, a more appreciative version of me, for sure.
So I'm curious, how would we help the viewers, just in a nutshell, understand, okay, we have to be vulnerable to identify our trauma. That sounds like maybe it's the first step towards post-traumatic growth. Where's that second step? Well, I guess finding the community to be safe in that.
Where are the
Where
spaces
is that
where you can do
change?
that? Isn't that the question? Like where do you have a safe space to express this feeling? Right? And really, when I ask you, I ask me.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying my life tremendously changed when I started to participate to men's circles, right? And I've been doing work. I've done a lot of work, but for some reason, and again, that can be the topic of another conversation.
Yeah.
Sitting in men's circles created unexpectedly such a powerful space for me as a man to challenge society's preconceived ideas and rules that, as a man, this is what I need to be. And it doesn't matter if you're French, American, you're North African, doesn't matter, right? There is most probably, right, as a man, sadly, there's less, I would argue there's less spaces for men than for women. Women do that all the time. You're intelligent enough to understand that this is ongoing work. You're in touch with your emotions, mainly, right? And there's spaces where women are able to change, to share. For men, these spaces are rare.
Right.
These spaces are rare. And when there's spaces, what's the conversation about? Like sport, politics. I've been told at times, like when I was sitting with some guys I had just met, and for whatever reason the conversation went, we started to talk about death and this and this, and I remember that fellow that became a dear brother of mine. It was like, whoa, we kind of going deep. I don't know you. I was like, I'm not sure I want to go that deep with you, and I was like, I may be dead tomorrow. I don't care. I don't care about the scores of the baseball team. I don't want to spend my evening talking about that. I want to talk about stuff that that are significant, that are important in my life, and I want to be able to share with you, things that are important to me that will make me a better person. And so, to your question. And question for the viewers here. Do you have a safe space? What are the safe spaces? Who are the safe people where you can be truly yourself? Where you're being asked how you doing? You don't have to be like, yeah, great. Even though, even
Yeah.
though, you feel like shit. So does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I know that for me, and where I saw change, because change has to happen for growth. And what I saw was that I had to feel first safe to myself to be vulnerable and to be what I thought was weak at the time, and I guess within that weakness I found strength. Um, so I believe that first it had to come from myself. I had to look myself in the mirror and I had to be honest with myself. And I know I've spoken about this before in our past talks, where there's like 80% of women don't truly look in the mirror and look at themselves and ask themselves, like, what does she need from me in the reflection? Instead, it's like criticizing, or maybe not even looking at all. So for me, that had to start first. Was, Amari, something is happening right now, and it's been happening. Be honest with yourself. What, instead of me being angry at my body, or being angry at my situation, or being a victim to life and a victim to God, is where my mindset was before my radical change. Was, why me? I had to say, what in my life right now, what am I doing right now that's not aligned with who I am? What is preventing me from healing? Why am I in this position? What was my lifestyle like? And do I have a right to question God? No, of course I don't. And these type of mindset changes had to happen first. I had to become very humble, and I think you used that word. I had to become very humble in my approach to what I wanted, and I needed to first identify where I was, where I wanted to go, and then be humble as far as the fact that that gap was so large, and it was going to take a lot for me to get to where I wanted to be. And with that, as I became more honest with myself, I began to, as I started being honest with myself, and I really want to use that word, being, then I started doing honest things that were aligned with my values, that were more family centered and love centered. And who I was around changed because of who I was being to myself. So there was no longer me going out with friends that was just superficial, like you said, just talking about sports. For me, it was talking about shopping or whatever. Gossip was in university at the time, 4 years ago, like just things like that. I had to be honest with myself, and then through that, it's kind of like you look in the mirror of who your friends are. They but your friends, my friends, in a way, my family are my friends. They have the same value system that I have. And when I'm surrounded by people who have the same value system that I have, that understand what I'm going through and understand the person that I'm trying to become, then that creates a safe space for me to keep on going towards in my journey. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes sense, and I just want to. I found it interesting because I agree, or I resonate with, being with people around the same value, and yet for me that was not enough to be able to dig deep, especially if within my family and this and that. Because there were family patterns that were stuck in, and for me to be able to have emotional sovereignty, I had to witness men being emotionally sovereign, being honest, being vulnerable, right? And for me that even though I understood what it was, right, for me it was so helpful to be in a space where at the beginning I would just I would learn, I would listen. Um, we say iron sharpens iron. I can't learn that from somebody who hasn't done it, who hasn't mastered it, right?
Yeah.
And and that's interesting, because I feel like emotional sovereignty is a practice. This is something that you can improve. This is most certainly something that I want to improve within myself, because that makes me I'd like to think that makes me a better person, a better husband, a better father, and so on and so forth. And so, if not improving my own self, I feel like I'm the most interesting project, right? Like in terms of my own self, it's like I want to be able to dig deep and free myself from all these layers of trauma and these filters, and so that I can come back to the truth of who I am. And for me to do that, I know I was stuck at some point in that journey. I had a lot of knowledge, I had a lot of skills, and yet I needed a container that was bigger than myself. I needed a place where I had a bunch of, in that party, for me, that's men's work that did it, a bunch of men's nervous system that were vibrating, that were resonating, that were saying, we're here and we're carrying you right now, and you don't have to hold on, you don't have to protect, you can go deeper, right?
That's beautiful.
Guiding into this process of like going deep, touching that pain, recognizing that it is temporary and it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then having the opportunity to be pulled back, right, by my brothers, say, hey, and now it's time to come back, and then I know the journey. I know the journey into pain, and I start to know. And so for me, seeing other men showing vulnerability was a game changer. Right, and maybe because I grew up with a father who was very well intentioned, that vulnerability is very supportive, right? And so you can't practice, let alone teach what you haven't experienced. So I just want to mention that the modeling. That's why I'm not interested in being around. That's why a lot of my relationships have evolved because. Some of them got so shallow that I was like, what is this? I have zero, there is no opportunity for us to become better people together, to grow together. We've both been through trauma, and right now there's two possibilities. Either we're pulling each other down, or we're just, lifting each other up. And so I think the acknowledgement of that, for me, not using the past tense because again that's an ongoing work, but acknowledging that in my life there are relationships that I moved on because there was very little for us. There was no helping each other out to become better people. It was just
That's true.
Unhealthy attachments.
That it's really beautiful what you described as far as your sacred circle and men community. I think that process is amazing. And for me, I agree. You have to be around people that will challenge you to be better. And for me, I think because my family is where we have a lot of togetherness, but we come from different places. So the family that I have, we all were raised by different parents, like different moms or different fathers. And also my husband himself, when I needed this change, when I needed to stop questioning God, it was him who said, who are you to question God? Don't you ever say that sentence again. And no one had ever spoken to me that way, where I was just kind of like, okay, I guess you're right. That was hurtful to hear, but you're right. And I had to I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am without his experience being greater than mine and having challenging times and depending on spirituality and growth from spirituality to heal. I wouldn't have had that from my sisters my sisters are my best friends. We have the same dad, but we don't have the same mom. So we were raised in different households. And for me, my household, if something bad happened, I catastrophize. And that's what I learned is the world's going to end. This one thing happened, the world's going to end. And my sisters were really amazing in the fact that like the world didn't end. I saw you, it didn't end. You survived, you're resilient. And my sisters also have different religions than me. We all pray, we all believe in God, but there's a different way that we do it. And there's beauty in being able to be honest with each other and say, hey, this is what's worked for me. And hey, in my practice, you can't live life that way. And so I'm lucky that I have a family that is diverse. And I also have a family that, because I'm maybe the youngest, but that had more experience than me at the time, that could guide me and also loved me unconditionally, where it was just like, hey, we see that you're in pain, but you can't be like this, or maybe your life needs to change, or these are the habits that work for me and maybe you need to adopt them or just try them out. But also allowing me to be in that pain, and they held space for my pain, and it allowed me to grow in my own way and take and receive from them in my own spin. So yeah, it's great that you had that circle. I think I have a little circle of that. A little bit different since it's sisters and a husband, but yeah.
But that's the same answer, right? As we reach the end of this talk, an invitation to me, to you, to all the viewers is really, identifying the safe spaces where you can be yourself and you can express yourself, and to reflect on, my experience with my men's circles, which is an ongoing practice, which we'll talk about later, and with your family, also identifying the safe people where you can be yourself. Because what I'm expecting from a true friend, a true partner, whether it's a partner in love, in friendship, in worship, and so on and so forth, I'm expecting honesty and transparency, and just like your husband, right, who said, don't question your faith.
Yeah.
Stay strong in your faith. That's what he was saying. That's also what I'm expecting from my brothers and my sisters, to say, when I start to get lost into my own fears and traumas and old patterns, is to be able to call me on my shit and say, wait, this is, you can be better than that. That's why I'm saying iron sharpens iron. That's why I'm saying surrounding myself and surrounding ourselves with people who are able to help us rise and help us, lift. I think is a tough one, but very much worthwhile endeavor.
And necessary, yes.
So, as we any last words, Amari?
No, that I really enjoyed this conversation. It was great to reflect, and I think it brought some gratitude and appreciation feelings like over me. It was great.
Well, thank you. Same here. I'm inviting everybody to. Well, you're welcome to join us next week, same time, 8 a.m. Pacific. That's 11 p.m. Eastern. Some other time zone, depending where you are in the world. Invitation also to view all the other talk that we've had with Amari. We've covered quite a variety of topics so far. Please head to the Healing Studio online on YouTube, on Instagram, and all our links for social media will be in the event description, or will be down there.
Yes, and you can find me at Body and More Wellness. Any chronic pain coaching questions that you may have, and also send us any DMs that you have about healing, about pain management. We would love to do a talk surrounding that question.
Sounds good. Thank you, Amari. Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Thank you, Pierre. Bye.